The news broke like thunder. Cameras caught Rasheeda Frost stepping out of her Atlanta boutique. No glam squad, no smile, no VH1 mic pack clipped to her waist, just her lawyer walking beside her, a thick folder in his hand stamped with the words confidential. Within minutes, blogs were on fire. Rasheeda SUES, VH1 headline, screamed. Another claimed she was about to expose everything the producers don't want you to know. For years, viewers had followed Rasheeda's story on Love and Hip Hop, Atlanta, her marriage, her music, her business, her heartbreak. They cried when Kirk cheated. They gasped when Jasmine appeared with the baby. And they cheered every time Rasheeda forgave him. But now she was saying it had all been a lie. In her lawsuit, she accused VH1 of fabricating her marriage problems, scripting her breakdowns, and editing her life to make a mockery of her womanhood. The rumor mill went wild. Insiders whispered that the lawsuit named producers by name, people she had once called friends. The papers reportedly claimed VH1 pressured her to reenact private arguments that never happened, forced her to read fake text messages, and even hired extras to play mistresses and friends who didn't exist. "This is bigger than reality TV," said one industry insider. "If Rasheeda's telling the truth, this could destroy VH1's entire love and hip-hop empire." Fans flooded social media. Some called her brave, others called her bitter. "Why now?" one follower asked. "Wasn't she getting paid?" Another replied, "Maybe she finally snapped after years of being manipulated." Behind the scenes, Kirk Frost was nowhere to be found. Paparazzi staked out their house, but only Rasheeda's assistant was seen coming and going, carrying boxes marked documents. A producer from the show allegedly told a blogger, "She's got recordings proof the producers made her act out scenes she didn't want to do." The most shocking claim came from a leaked email. According to it, VH1 executives had planned a marriage meltdown special months in advance, complete with fake therapy sessions and a staged argument in their living room. They wanted tears, not truth, the email read. Rasheeda's lawyer, a calm man in a navy suit, addressed reporters outside the courthouse. "My client has spent years letting the network define her reality," he said. "Today, she's taking it back." As the crowd buzzed and cameras flashed, Rasheeda finally spoke. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. "They made me look like a fool for ratings. I was loyal to that show, and they turned my life into a circus. No more." And just like that, the world stopped seeing her as a cast member and started seeing her as a woman going to war with the network that built her fame. What no one knew yet was that this was only the beginning. The lawsuit was just the first spark. What would follow would burn through Atlanta's entertainment scene, leaving secrets, betrayals, and broken alliances in its wake. It started quietly, the way real explosions always do. A few whispers here, a few confused text messages there. People inside the production office said Rasheeda had stopped answering calls from VH1 executives. Others claimed she walked off set during filming for the new season. For weeks, the producers thought she was bluffing. She had done this before, gotten upset, taken time off, come back when the cameras were ready. But this time, something felt different. On a humid Monday morning, she showed up at Frost Bistro with no makeup, wearing sweats, holding her phone close. The small group of staff working the early shift froze when they saw her walk in. She wasn't supposed to be there. She had told everyone she was done with all of it. She went straight to her office in the back, shut the door, and called her lawyer. Her voice was shaking. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "They made my life a storyline. They made me hate my husband for television." Her lawyer told her to breathe, to collect everything she had. "Emails, contracts, anything that proves they told you what to say," he said. She opened her laptop and began scrolling through old messages from producers. Notes from meetings, script outlines, labeled scene structure. There it was, one from 2018. The subject line read, "Episode 10, Confrontation, Kirk's Confession Draft." She had read it back then and laughed, thinking it was just a story arc plan. But now, reading it again, she noticed the phrasing. Rasheeda reacts with visible anger and walks away after Kirk's admission. Visible anger. Walks away. It was word for word what she had done in the final cut. She sat back, her chest tight. The whole moment that had broken the internet, the crying in the kitchen, the silence at the reunion, the look of disbelief when Kirk admitted his affair had been written before it even happened. That night, Kirk came home to find her surrounded by papers. "What's all this?" he asked, confused. She didn't look up. "Proof," she said softly. "Proof they used us." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Baby, you signed up for this. We both did. That's what reality TV is." She looked at him like she didn't recognize him. "No," she said. "This isn't reality. This is humiliation. He tried to calm her down, but she was done listening. Years of pain, gossip, and memes had piled up. She remembered every time someone online called her stupid for staying, every edit that made her look weak, every fake reaction she was forced to repeat until producers got the perfect shot. They built an empire off my heartbreak, she said, and they think I'm just gonna let it go. By the next morning, the internet had picked up on the tension. A fan posted a tweet. Rasheeda and Kirk unfollowed each other again. Something's up. Within hours, blogs reposted it, and fans began dissecting everything: who liked whose post, who deleted what. Meanwhile, inside the Frost home, the atmosphere was heavy. Kirk paced the living room, talking on speakerphone with a producer named Melinda. "We're hearing she's lawyering up," Melinda said, her tone nervous. "Tell me that's not true." "I don't know what she's doing," Kirk muttered. "She's mad. Really mad. I've never seen her like this." Melinda sighed. "Look, the network doesn't want trouble, but if she files anything, they'll fight back. They've got contracts. They'll say everything was consented." Kirk didn't answer. He knew she was serious this time. Later that day, Rasheeda met with her lawyer in a small office downtown. The windows overlooked Atlanta traffic, horns blaring far below. She placed her folder on the desk. "I have everything," she said. "Emails, footage notes, even text messages where they told me to cry more." The lawyer skimmed through the pile, eyebrows raised. "This is strong," he said, "but it's also risky. They'll come for you. They'll call you ungrateful. They'll say you knew what you were signing." "Then let them," she said. "I've been quiet too long." A few days later, a courier delivered a thick envelope to VH1's corporate office. It was addressed to the head of production. Inside, a formal notice of intent to sue for emotional distress, defamation, and breach of contract. Attached were screenshots, transcripts, and several USB drives labeled behind-the-scenes audio. Within hours, the office erupted. Executives scrambled into conference calls. One assistant overheard someone shouting, "How the hell did she get that audio?" Another voice replied, "Because someone leaked it." The leaked audio was what set everything on fire. It was from a reunion taping 2 years earlier. In it, a producer could be heard coaching Rasheeda mid-scene. "Say it again. But this time, make it sound like you don't trust him anymore." Rasheeda's voice followed, tired and shaky. "But that's not how I feel," the producer snapped. "It doesn't matter. The audience needs to see pain." The clip spread across social media before VH1 could contain it. Within hours, hashtags like #Justice for Rasheeda and #VH1 Exposed were trending. Fans began revisiting old episodes, analyzing scenes, comparing timestamps, pointing out every suspicious cut and unnatural reaction. Bloggers dug deeper. One claimed the network had a secret storyline vault, a database of fake plots planned seasons ahead. Another alleged they paid certain cast members bonuses for creating viral fights. For years, people had joked that Love and Hip Hop was scripted. Now it didn't seem like a joke at all. Rasheeda stayed silent, ignoring calls from journalists and friends. Even Carly Red, usually first to speak on anything, texted her, "Sis, what's going on? Producers are calling everyone for statements." She didn't reply. She knew who her real friends were and most of them weren't calling. The pressure built. Paparazzi followed her car, shouting questions. Kirk begged her to lay low. "Please, baby, they're gonna make you look crazy," he said. "Let the lawyers handle it." She turned to him, calm but firm. "They already made me look crazy. Now I'm just telling the truth." Inside VH1's boardroom, panic turned to strategy. Executives debated whether to settle or fight. One senior producer slammed her notebook shut. "If we cave, every cast member will come for us next," she said. "We need to protect the brand." Someone else spoke quietly. "What if she has more recordings?" The room went silent. She did, and she was ready to use them. That night, Rasheeda met privately with a journalist known for exposing entertainment scandals. The two sat in a dim corner of a restaurant, their voices low. "Off the record?" the journalist asked. "Not yet," Rasheeda said, "but soon." He leaned forward. "Do you have proof they faked your marriage storyline?" She nodded slowly. "Not just mine. Others too." As she spoke, her phone buzzed an unknown number. She answered, her voice cautious. A familiar tone came through the line. "You don't know what you're getting into," the caller said. "Walk away before this gets ugly." She hung up, heart pounding. She didn't recognize the voice, but she could guess who sent it. The next morning, a letter arrived at her home. No return address. Inside was a single printed message. "Stop before you lose everything." She stared at it, her hands trembling, but instead of fear, she felt something else They thought they could intimidate her, the same way they had controlled her story for years. Not this time. She took a deep breath, looked at her reflection in the mirror, and whispered to herself, "They turned me into a character. Now they'll meet the real me." And with that, she opened her laptop, drafted a statement, and pressed send. Within minutes, every gossip site and entertainment page in America had the headline, "Rasheeda Frost goes to war with VH1." The battle had officially begun. The world woke up to chaos. Every blog, every gossip page, every entertainment site had the same headline, Rasheeda Frost versus VH1. Twitter exploded overnight. She finally snapped. One fan wrote. Another said, "We knew something was off about those storylines." Hashtags were everywhere. Hashtag Team RASHEEDA. Hashtag VH1 lies. Hashtag free from fake. Even celebrities began to weigh in. Tammy Rivera posted, "Sometimes peace means walking away from the bag." K. Michelle tweeted a simple wow, but it was enough to send fans spiraling. By noon, cameras were camped outside Frost Bistro again. Reporters shouted questions through the glass. Customers filmed from their phones. And the staff looked terrified. Inside, Rasheeda sat at a corner table with her lawyer, trying to stay composed. "They're gonna hit back," he warned her. "Expect statements, maybe a smear campaign. They'll try to twist your words." She nodded slowly. "They've been twisting my life for years. I can handle it." Across town, inside a sleek office at VH1 headquarters, a crisis meeting was underway. The head of reality programming stood at the front of the room, red-eyed from no sleep. "We can't let this spiral," she said. "Rasheeda's a fan favorite, but we own the footage. If she breaks her NDA, we'll bury her in court." A younger producer spoke up. "What if we're wrong? What if she really does have proof?" The room fell silent. The older woman finally said, "Then we make her look unstable. Leak something about her marriage. Remind people she's benefited from this for over a decade. Make her the villain." Within hours, the spin began. Anonymous sources started feeding blogs. One headline read, "VH1 insider claims Rasheeda knew all about fake storylines." Another said, "Rasheeda's lawsuit a publicity stunt for new business." The narrative was shifting fast. Kirk watched it unfold from their living room, the TV blaring. He turned to her, uneasy. "They're painting you like you're crazy." She didn't flinch. "Good," she said. "That means they're scared." He sighed. "You know how powerful they are. They can make anyone disappear from the industry." She looked up at him, eyes cold. "They already erased the real me years ago." Later that evening, she went live on Instagram, no filter, no makeup, no background music. Within minutes, over 50,000 people joined. Her hands trembled slightly as she began to speak. "I've been quiet because I was scared. Scared of losing deals. Scared of people not believing me. But I'm done being scared. Yes, I'm suing VH1. Yes, I have proof. And no, this isn't about money, it's about respect." The comments flooded in instantly. "We got your back, Queen. Expose them all. Don't let them silence you." She paused, eyes glistening. "They edited my life. They made me read lines. They told me how to react, what to wear, even when to cry. I trusted them. I thought I was showing my truth. Turns out, I was just showing theirs." In a quiet corner of Los Angeles, a former production assistant named Elijah was watching that live. He had worked on Love and Hip Hop for 3 seasons before quitting. Now, guilt burned in his chest. He opened his laptop and began typing an anonymous email to a journalist. "She's telling the truth," he wrote. "I was there. They scripted almost everything. They called it guided reality. They said audiences wanted drama, not honesty." He attached several audio files, meetings, on-set recordings, private chats. 2 days later, one of those clips leaked online. It captured a producer laughing, saying, "We told Kirk to confess on camera. He didn't even want to, but we told him the ratings needed a shock moment." Another voice responded, "Yeah, and we made Rasheeda cry 3 takes before we got the perfect one." The internet went insane. Blogs reposted the clip. Fans dissected every second. And YouTube commentators churned out videos with titles like "Proof Rasheeda was right all along." VH1 panicked. Their lawyers filed cease and desist letters everywhere. They called it manipulated audio. They threatened to sue anyone who shared it, but the damage was done. Meanwhile, Rasheeda stayed off social media for a few days, focusing on her next move. She met privately with her attorney and a publicist. "We're filing officially Monday morning," her lawyer said. "Once we do, everything becomes public record." The publicist added, "You should prepare a statement for Good Morning America or TMZ. They're already requesting interviews." Rasheeda hesitated. "I'll speak," she said quietly, "but not on their terms." Over the weekend, Kirk tried to convince her to drop it. He paced the kitchen while she scrolled through legal drafts. "Listen," he said. "We've got businesses, kids, money tied up in all this. If this goes too far, they'll drag me to—" She looked up, her tone sharp. "Then maybe you should have spoken up when you knew they were lying." He froze. For once, he had no comeback. By Monday, Atlanta's courthouse was swarmed. Fans showed up with signs reading "Protect Black Women" and "Reality ain't reality." Bloggers streamed live coverage as Rasheeda and her lawyer walked up the steps. She didn't speak to reporters, but her expression said enough: calm, defiant, unstoppable. Inside the courthouse, her legal team filed the lawsuit, Rasheeda Frost vs. Viacom International Inc. It accused VH1 of emotional manipulation, fabricated storylines, and intentional infliction of reputational harm. Attached were 36 pages of evidence, including emails, text messages, and internal notes from producers. That same day, VH1 released a statement: "Love and Hip Hop has always aimed to tell authentic stories. We are disappointed by Ms. Frost's claims and stand by our production process." The comment section beneath the post was brutal. "Authentic stories. Please. You edited her tears for clicks. We believe Rasheeda." That night, she sat in her bedroom, scrolling through the reactions. Kirk walked in quietly. "They'll never forgive us," he said. She turned off her phone. "They don't need to forgive us," she said. "They need to hear the truth." Later, as the city went to sleep, a storm rolled in over Atlanta. Thunder rumbled in the distance, lightning flashing across the skyline. And in that flicker of light, Rasheeda felt something she hadn't felt in years: freedom. Because for the first time since signing her name on that reality TV contract, she wasn't playing a role. She was finally, completely, herself, and she was just getting started. The storm didn't stop the headlines. By sunrise, every network and gossip page was spinning the story in a new direction. CNN ran a headline that read, "Rasheeda Frost vs. VH1, The Reality Reckoning." TMZ had paparazzi footage of her leaving the courthouse with the caption, "Queen of Atlanta Fights Back." Even Entertainment Tonight ran a segment titled, "When Reality Stops Being Real." At Frost Bistro, the mood was tense. Customers whispered, employees avoided eye contact, and Kirk spent most of the morning in his office on the phone. The calls weren't business, they were damage control. Sponsorships were already calling. One clothing brand that once paid Rasheeda to promote their line sent a polite message: "We'll pause collaboration until the legal matter is resolved." She read it twice and deleted it without replying. She knew what it meant. The entertainment world didn't want truth. It wanted silence dressed up as professionalism. By afternoon, bloggers began circulating unseen footage from old seasons. Someone had uploaded a deleted scene that never aired. In it, Rasheeda could be seen crying in her dressing room, saying, "I'm tired of pretending." A producer's voice from off-camera said, "Just one more take, Rasheeda. This time, make it look like you're staying with him for love." Fans froze the clip, analyzed the voice, matched it to a senior producer named Troy. Soon, #FireTroy was trending. VH1's social media manager tried to turn off comments, but screenshots spread faster than any post could be deleted. That night, Kirk came home later than usual. He looked exhausted. "They're saying you're trying to ruin the brand," he said, setting his phone on the counter. She poured herself a glass of wine and looked at him calmly. "They ruined it themselves. I just turned the lights on." He sat down across from her. "I didn't know it would go this far." "You didn't want to know," she said. As long as the checks cleared. He didn't argue. He just looked down, silent, the sound of rain filling the space between them. The next morning, her phone rang non-stop. Producers, lawyers, ex-cast members, everyone wanted to talk. Some begged her to drop it. Others offered to join her. One voice she hadn't heard in years came through the line: "Jasmine Washington." "Hey," Jasmine said, her tone hesitant. "I saw what's going on. If you're really taking them to court, I might have something you need." Rasheeda froze. "Why would you help me?" "Because they ruined my life too," Jasmine said. "You think I wanted to be the villain forever? They made me sign a contract that made me look like a homewrecker for ratings. I got paid once. You got to move on." "I didn't." For a long moment, neither woman spoke. It was strange hearing sympathy in Jasmine's voice. "Send me what you have," Rasheeda said finally. "And if you're lying, I'm not," Jasmine cut in. "Check your email in 10. And just like that, an unlikely alliance was born. Minutes later, an email arrived with a folder labeled Season 5 Documents. Inside were message transcripts, production notes, and call sheets showing how Jasmine had been directed to surprise Kirk at events that were fully pre-scheduled. One note even read, Make sure Rasheeda's mic is on before Jasmine enters. It was proof. Undeniable. The lawyer nearly dropped his coffee when he saw it. This changes everything, he said. This isn't just your case now. This is systemic. Good, Rasheeda said quietly. Then let's burn the system down. VH1, however, wasn't going down without a fight. The network's attorneys filed a counterclaim, accusing Rasheeda of defamation and breach of contract. In their statement, they wrote, "As a professional participant in reality entertainment, Ms. Frost consented to all portrayals and storylines for commercial use. The internet didn't buy it." Fans bombarded their official pages with comments. "Consent to humiliation. You used her pain for profit. We stand with Rasheeda." Days later, VH1's senior vice president of programming resigned to pursue other opportunities. Insiders whispered that she'd been forced out. One anonymous crew member told a blogger, "She knew everything. She even pushed for more fights, more tears. Said it was good TV." While all that unraveled, Rasheeda sat in her office, surrounded by legal papers and old memories. Her phone buzzed. Carly read calling. "Girl, you really did it," Carly said. "They're panicking. I got a call from a producer this morning. They're scared more people will come forward." "You thinking about it?" Rasheeda asked. "Honestly," Carly sighed. "Yeah, I'm tired of being their joke." "Then do it," Rasheeda said. "Don't wait until they rewrite your story too." For the first time in years, the two women weren't just co-stars, they were allies. By the end of the week, 3 more cast members had publicly voiced support. Spice posted, "They turned our real lives into circus acts." Erica Mena commented under a gossip post, "I warned y'all about production years ago." Each voice made the network's silence louder. But the deeper the truth spread, the more dangerous things got. One night, Rasheeda's car alarm went off outside her house. When she went to check, a note was taped to the windshield. "You think this is a game? Stop talking or you'll regret it." She called her lawyer immediately. "Should I go to the police?" she asked. "Yes," he said firmly. "And tell them everything." The detective who took her statement didn't seem surprised. "This kind of thing happens when money and power are threatened," he said. "Keep security close. This won't be the last warning." Rasheeda thanked him, though her hands shook the whole time. She wasn't scared for herself anymore. She was scared for what would happen if she stayed silent again. That night, she opened her laptop and began writing a letter to her fans. "For years," she typed, "you watched me on TV and thought you were seeing my truth. You weren't, you were seeing what they allowed. I owe you honesty now, even if it costs me everything." She posted it at midnight. Within an hour, it had over 1 million likes and hundreds of thousands of comments. The people were with her. VH1 tried to ignore it, but advertisers began pulling out of upcoming episodes. One sponsor released a statement, "We cannot support any production accused of exploiting women for entertainment." The next morning, a second one followed. Then a third. Inside the network boardroom, panic turned to fury. "She's killing us," one executive shouted. "We need to release something. Anything." Another replied, "We can't. Our lawyers said if we deny, and it's proven false, we're finished." They were already finished. They just didn't know it yet, because Rasheeda had more. Much more. Recordings, texts, unreleased footage, the kind of evidence that could shatter not just VH1, but the entire reality TV machine built on manipulation and pain. And she wasn't going to stop until every secret saw the light. By the next week, Atlanta had turned into a battlefield of gossip, loyalty, and fear. The city that once celebrated Rasheeda as boss chick now stood divided, half cheering her courage, half questioning her sanity. Billboards still showed her smiling face beside the VH1 logo, but under them, graffiti appeared overnight. "Free Rasheeda, truth over TV. Stop faking our queens." At the same time, VH1 doubled down. They aired a special episode titled "The Frost Family Speaks," recorded months before the lawsuit, but promoted as if it were current. The episode opened with dramatic music, cuts of Kirk and Rasheeda sitting in their living room, holding hands. But the public noticed the lighting. The wardrobe bit was recycled footage. Still, the network tried to frame it as their side of the story. When the episode aired, social media tore it apart. "This is manipulation 101, one fan posted. "They're literally using old footage to make her look complicit." The comments were brutal. YouTube reactors went live, mid-episode, pausing frames, showing proof of reused clips. One fan even posted side-by-side shots proving that Rasheeda's nails in the new footage matched her manicure from 2021. As the backlash grew, the story crossed into mainstream media. Morning shows debated whether reality television had gone too far. A psychologist on one panel said, These stars are signing away their humanity for the sake of storytelling. It's exploitation disguised as entertainment. Back in Atlanta, Rasheeda watched the coverage in silence. Her lawyer arrived with a thick folder documents subpoenaed from VH1's production archives. "You might want to sit down for this," he said. She opened the folder. Inside were internal memos, scripts, and something called a narrative forecast. It was a document dated 2 months before Jasmine's scandal broke on TV. Under forecast objectives, it said, Arc 1, Kirk's infidelity exposure. Arc 2, Rasheeda emotional collapse. Arc 3, staged forgiveness. Rasheeda read the last part aloud. "Staged forgiveness," she whispered. "They planned your heartbreak," the lawyer said. "Every beat of it." The papers didn't just mention her. There were references to Yandi Mendices, Erica, and Carly. "Secondary relationships will be interwoven for maximum emotional tension," one paragraph read. Her blood ran cold. "They didn't just fake my story," she said. "They faked everyone's." Meanwhile, Kirk had started avoiding cameras altogether. He'd stopped posting, stopped going to the bistro, and told everyone he needed space. Privately, he was getting calls from producers begging him to issue a statement, distancing himself from his wife. "Say she's emotional," one text read. "Say you support the network." He didn't reply. Deep down, he knew what they'd done was wrong. He'd played along for years, convincing himself it was just television. But now the truth was catching up, and for the first time he felt ashamed. One night, he showed up at the house, looking worn down. "They want me to go on record against you," he said quietly. Rasheeda didn't even look up from her laptop. "And what are you going to do?" He sat across from her. "I told them no." She raised her eyes, suspicious. "Why?" "Because they ruined both of us," he said. "And I'm tired of pretending they didn't." For the first time in months, she almost believed him. 2 days later, a new twist hit the internet. A former editor for Love and Hip Hop named Celeste Grant posted a long thread titled, "I Can't Stay Silent Anymore." She wrote, "I was in charge of post-production on multiple seasons. We were told to cut scenes to make Rasheeda look foolish. They'd say, 'Give us the meme moment.' When she cried, they'd loop the sound to make it worse. When she was calm, we deleted it. She didn't deserve that." Within hours, her post had been shared over 100,000 times. VH1 tried to dismiss her as a disgruntled ex-employee, but the internet wasn't having it. More staffers started speaking out anonymously. One told a journalist, "We were told to treat cast members like characters, not people." Another said, "We knew it was wrong, but everyone was scared to lose their job." The story turned global. British tabloids, African entertainment blogs, even Latin American news outlets covered it. "The fall of reality TV royalty." One headline read. Inside her home, Rasheeda scrolled through the chaos with mixed emotions: vindication, exhaustion, fear. Her lawyer urged her to stay calm. "The more they talk, the stronger your case gets," he said. But there was one thing she couldn't ignore. A private number kept calling. No name, no message, just silence. Every night around the same time. On the 4th night, she picked up. A man's voice said, "You've made your point. Now stop before we make ours." She hung up instantly, heart racing. She wanted to believe it was just another bluff, but deep down, she knew the people she was fighting had the money and reach to do worse. The next morning, she increased her security detail. 2 guards outside, 1 unmarked car following her during errands. Kirk offered to handle it, but she refused. "You can't fix something you helped break," she told him. Still, he stayed close. Guilt had a way of turning enemies into shadows. As weeks passed, new revelations kept surfacing. Leaked call sheets proved that certain random fights between cast members had been rehearsed twice before filming. An old sound engineer came forward, admitting he'd been instructed to add crying sounds to scenes where there were none. Even reunion specials had been partially scripted, with cue cards for hosts prompting specific reactions. Each piece of proof was another brick in VH1's crumbling wall. Advertisers continued to flee. Reruns were quietly pulled from streaming platforms. Fan petitions demanded refunds for false representation. Rasheeda's lawyer smiled for the first time in months. "They can't win this anymore," he said. "Not in the court of law, not in the court of public opinion." But Rasheeda wasn't celebrating. She looked out the window, eyes distant. "Winning doesn't bring back my peace," she said. "They stole years of my life. Every time people laughed at me on TV, I was living through it again." Her lawyer said softly, "Maybe this isn't just about winning. Maybe it's about changing what comes next." That night, she sat alone on her porch, wind moving through the trees, city lights glowing faintly beyond. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Jasmine. "You did it, Jasmine wrote. They finally called me to apologize. Rasheeda smiled faintly for the first time in weeks. Maybe this fight wasn't just hers anymore. Maybe it was bigger than all of them. And as she closed her eyes, she realized something. The show had always called itself Love and Hip Hop, but what she'd found wasn't love or music, it was truth. Raw, painful, real truth. And no network could edit that out. The lawsuit entered discovery phase, and the quiet tension in Atlanta turned into a televised circus. News vans lined the street outside the courthouse. Reporters shouted questions as Rasheeda arrived each morning in a black SUV, sunglasses on, face unreadable. Do you regret doing reality TV? Did VH1 really fake your marriage? Is Kirk testifying against you? She ignored them all. The only sound she acknowledged was the heavy click of cameras and the low hum of her lawyer's voice saying, "Head high, keep walking." Inside the courtroom, things felt colder. The lawyers from VH1 sat across the aisle. Corporate calm, hiding panic. They wore the kind of smiles that came from money and strategy. Their lead attorney, a woman named Marianne Foster, spoke smoothly, rehearsed. "My client has produced decades of groundbreaking television," she said. "Mrs. Frost's allegations are exaggerated and self-serving." Rasheeda's lawyer rose slowly. "Then let's start with the audio," he said. The room went silent as a small speaker was placed on the table. The sound of a director's voice filled the air, familiar, commanding, unmistakably real. "Okay, Kirk, when you walk in, just admit it, pause for effect, then say I'm sorry." We'll cue Rasheeda's reaction. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the judge frowned. Marianne shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The clip continued. "Remember," the voice said, "we're selling pain here. The audience needs to feel betrayal." When it ended, Rasheeda looked up, eyes steady. "That was my marriage," she said quietly. "And they sold it like a commercial." VH1's lawyers tried to discredit the recording, calling it out of context. But more evidence followed: emails, texts, scheduling memos. Each one chipped away at their defense. By day 3, the courtroom had turned into a theater of confession. Former producers testified, reluctantly at first. One named Darren admitted under oath, "Yes, scenes were planned in advance. We sometimes told cast members to repeat emotional moments. It was considered standard practice." Another, a woman named Jade, confessed, "We were told to make Rasheeda look confused or heartbroken. They called it the loyal wife storyline. It tested well with audiences." Rasheeda listened in silence, hands folded in her lap, her lawyer's notes untouched. Every word felt like reopening a wound, but she refused to look away. Kirk was called to the stand next. The room fell still. The same man who once stood beside her on camera, now facing her across the courtroom. He looked nervous, but his voice was clear. "I knew some scenes were exaggerated," he said, "but I didn't know how far they went. They told me it was just entertainment. They didn't tell me it would destroy her." For the first time in years, she believed him. Outside the courthouse, fans gathered every day. Some brought posters, others flowers. One held a sign that read, "You gave us courage to leave our own fake stories." It made her eyes water. The case grew beyond Atlanta. Los Angeles producers, New York lawyers, even congressmen started talking about reality ethics. A senator tweeted, "If these allegations are true, we need new protections for cast members." Networks scrambled to review contracts overnight. But with every revelation came retaliation. Anonymous blogs began posting personal details about Rasheeda: old debts, private arguments, even pictures of her home. She recognized the tactic. "They're trying to scare me," she told her lawyer, "but I've lived in fear too long." On day 12 of the trial, a surprise witness took the stand: Celeste, the former editor, whose online confession had gone viral. She spoke softly but with conviction. "I can't undo what I did, but I can tell the truth," she said. "They ordered us to splice emotions. They'd take a tear from one scene and put it in another. They built fake heartbreak from real pain." The courtroom was silent except for the click of a reporter's pen. VH1's attorney stood to cross-examine. "Miss Grant, are you saying you knowingly manipulated the footage?" "Yes," Celeste said, her eyes glistening. "And it haunts me." The judge called for a recess. Outside, the media exploded. The editing scandal. Headlines screamed. VH1 caught red-handed. That night, Rasheeda sat in her living room, surrounded by boxes of documents. Kirk walked in quietly. "You did good today," he said. She didn't answer, just stared at an old wedding photo on the shelf. "Did we ever have a real moment?" she asked suddenly. He hesitated. "Yeah," he said. "The ones they didn't film." She smiled faintly. "Then at least I have that." The next morning, as testimony continued, another bombshell dropped. Jasmine Washington arrived at the courthouse unannounced, escorted by her attorney. Whispers filled the room as she took the stand. "I'm here because I was part of the lie too," she said. "They paid me to play the other woman. They gave me a script, told me how to act, even told me what kind of dress to wear. I was young and needed money. I didn't know it would follow me forever." When she looked at Rasheeda, her eyes softened. "I'm sorry for what they did to you and what they made me do." Rasheeda nodded slowly. "We were both used," she said under her breath. By the end of the week, VH1's defense had crumbled. Their legal team requested mediation behind closed doors, but Rasheeda refused. "I don't want quiet money," she said. "I want the truth public." The network's representatives looked pale. "Do you realize how much you're risking?" one asked. "I already lost everything once," she replied. "I'm not losing my soul to." Outside, the crowd cheered as she walked down the courthouse steps. Fans shouted her name, waving phones in the air. The woman who'd once been edited into a character had become a movement. That night, she went live again. Her voice was calm, her words heavy with truth. "They said my life was for ratings. They said pain sells. But you can't fake truth forever. Truth always finds its way out." Millions watched in silence as she ended the stream with one final sentence. "They made a show out of my marriage, but this time, I'm producing my own ending." And somewhere, behind the closed doors of a crumbling network, executives finally realized the empire they built on broken hearts had met the one woman they couldn't edit. As the courtroom battle dragged into its final stretch, the case had become the biggest entertainment story in the country. The headlines were relentless: VH1 on trial, Rasheeda's truth shaking Hollywood, the fall of reality television as we know it. Late-night hosts cracked nervous jokes, producers scrambled to revise contracts, and executives from other networks quietly held emergency meetings. The entire reality TV industry could feel the ground shifting beneath it. Inside the courtroom, Rasheeda's lawyer called his final witness on, old sound technician, named Reggie, who had worked for VH1 for nearly a decade. He walked to the stand with a nervous energy, clutching a worn notebook. "Mr. Reggie," the lawyer began, "can you explain to the court how emotional reactions were handled during post-production?" Reggie cleared his throat. "They called it enhancement," he said. "We were told to add sighs, sniffles, even fake crying noises. Sometimes we'd stretch a silence to make it seem awkward. The goal was to make the viewer uncomfortable enough to keep watching." The lawyer leaned in. "And did you personally alter any footage involving my client?" Reggie nodded. "Yes, ma'am. The scene in the kitchen when Mr. Frost confessed. She didn't cry right away. She sat quiet for about 10 seconds, trying to process. They cut that out. They replaced it with crying from another day. They wanted her to look broken." The courtroom gasped again. Rasheeda stared down at her hands, remembering how the world laughed at that scene. How memes had spread for weeks, calling her too forgiving, too soft, too blind. All those tears she'd been mocked for weren't even hers. They were manufactured. When court adjourned for the day, she stepped outside into a sea of flashing lights. A young girl broke through the crowd, holding out a letter. "Miss Rasheeda," she said shyly, "you made me realize I don't have to let people control my story." Rasheeda took the letter, smiling gently. "That's the whole reason I'm here," she said. Meanwhile, inside VH1's headquarters, panic had become policy. Entire departments were being audited, staff laid off quietly, scripts shredded. The boardroom was chaos. "The advertisers are gone," one executive shouted. "Half the cast wants out. And now the streaming platforms are suspending reruns." Another slammed a folder shut. "She's destroyed the illusion. Once people know how fake it is, they won't watch anymore. Or worse," said a third, "they'll start suing too." By then, several former cast members across other love and hip-hop franchises had already reached out to Rasheeda's lawyer. They wanted to join the case. What started as one woman's fight was turning into a class action. But even as victory neared, the cost weighed heavily. Late one night, Rasheeda sat on her porch, scrolling through messages. Mixed among the support were threats. "You're ruining black TV," one read. Another said, "They're gonna make sure you never work again." She closed her phone, staring into the dark. Kirk stepped outside quietly. "You can still walk away," he said softly. "You've already made your point." She shook her head. "This isn't about a point anymore. It's about legacy. I want our kids to see that truth matters." He sighed, sitting beside her. "We've been through everything. Cheating, scandals, rumors. But this feels like the first real fight we've ever had together." She glanced at him, half smiling. Then let's win it together. The next morning, final arguments began. VH1's lead attorney stood before the jury, polished and poised. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, this is entertainment. Television is edited, dramatized, stylized. It is not a crime. Ms. Frost understood that when she signed her contract, she became famous because of this show. She cannot now claim victimhood for the fame she built. Rasheeda's lawyer rose slowly, walking toward the jury. Fame built on falsehood isn't fame, she said. It's imprisonment. They took a woman's marriage, her dignity, her reputation and turned it into a product. They profited off her pain. This isn't entertainment. This is exploitation. As she spoke, screens behind her displayed stills. From the show, Rasheeda crying, Kirk looking ashamed, producers hovering off camera. You've seen what they sold you, the lawyer said, voice low and cutting. Now you know what really happened behind the scenes. This isn't about one woman versus a network. This is about power versus truth. The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge's expression softened. After closing statements, the jury deliberated for 7 hours. Outside, hundreds of fans waited, chanting her name. Journalists refreshed their feeds every few seconds. When the doors finally opened, the clerk read the verdict. In favor of the plaintiff, Rasheeda froze, her lawyer's hand found hers. You won, he whispered. The courtroom erupted. Kirk exhaled a shaky laugh. Even Jasmine, sitting quietly in the back row, wiped her eyes. Outside, the crowd roared as Rasheeda stepped into the flashing lights, holding the judgment papers in her hand. The final ruling ordered VH1 to issue a public apology, pay damages, and release all unedited footage from Love and Hip Hop, Atlanta to prove full transparency. It was a symbolic victory, but one that hit the industry like a meteor. News anchors called it the end of reality TV, as we knew it. Columnists wrote essays about the commodification of black womanhood. Entertainment lawyers began rewriting contracts overnight. And for the first time in years, the audience stopped laughing at the memes and started listening to the message. Back at home, Rasheeda sat on her couch, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Kirk handed her a cup of tea. So what now? He asked. She smiled faintly. Now I live. For real, this time. She picked up her phone, opened Instagram, and typed her final post. No more scripts. No more producers. Just me. The woman behind the edit. It went viral within minutes. And though Hollywood moved on to its next scandal soon after, one truth remained. Rasheeda Frost had changed the game forever. And in the quiet that followed, when the lights dimmed and the cameras packed away, she finally felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. Weeks passed, but the echo of the verdict refused to fade. Atlanta had turned into the epicenter of a cultural shift. Interviews, documentaries, think pieces. Every outlet wanted a piece of Rasheeda Frost. For once, not as a reality star, but as a woman who had broken an empire. The first network to reach out was CNN. They offered a primetime special titled The Truth Untold, Rasheeda Frost Speaks. The producers promised no edits, no re-records, no staged emotion. Your story, your words, they said. For the first time, she agreed. The studio lights were bright but soft, nothing like the harsh glare of VH1's cameras. The interviewer began gently. You changed television. When you hear that, how does it make you feel? Rasheeda paused, eyes down for a moment before answering. I didn't set out to change TV, she said. I just wanted my life back. The interview aired on a Sunday night, and nearly 10 million people tuned in. Her voice was calm, reflective, unshaken. She spoke about contracts signed in confusion, about the long nights crying in silence, about the fear of speaking up and losing everything. When the episode ended, the studio went quiet. No applause, just heavy silence, the kind that comes after truth. Within hours, hashtags like #RASHEED, #AFrostTruth and #OwnYourStory trended globally. Oprah tweeted, "Truth always wins, even if it takes time." Rihanna posted a single word, Queen, but not everyone was celebrating. Behind the scenes, VH1's remaining executives were still scrambling. An anonymous source leaked that the network had lost over 40% of its advertisers in a single quarter. A board member reportedly said, "She didn't just win a case, she dismantled a machine." Meanwhile, other cast members began following her path. Carly Red announced she was filing her own complaint. Spice released a YouTube video titled, "They Used My Pain for Profit." Even Mendy Sees and Yandi spoke publicly about producer manipulation. The dominoes were falling one by one. In the middle of it all, Rasheeda returned to Frost Bistro for the first time since the verdict. When she walked in, the staff clapped softly. Customers stood up. One older woman said, "Baby, you did what we all wish we could do. You told the truth and survived it." Rasheeda smiled and hugged her. "Telling it almost broke me," she said quietly. But staying silent already had. She began rebuilding, quietly rebranding her boutiques, expanding her beauty line, and working on a memoir titled Unedited. The tagline read, "They wrote my story. Now I'm writing the ending." Publishers fought for rights before the first chapter was even complete. Kirk stayed around, but things were different now. They were civil, maybe even peaceful, but the distance between them was permanent. He attended events with her, smiled for photos, but there was no performance left in either of them. One night, while closing the restaurant, he asked softly, "Do you think we can ever go back?" She looked at him, tired but kind. "We can't go back," she said. "We can only be honest moving forward." The honesty hurt, but it healed too. Soon after, Netflix called. They wanted to produce a documentary about the trial, real footage, real depositions, real emotions. The title, "The Woman They Couldn't Edit." Rasheeda hesitated at first. "I'm done being watched," she said. But then she realized this was her chance to control the lens for once. She agreed, on one condition: total creative control. When the documentary premiered, it shattered streaming records. It didn't dramatize her pain. It humanized it. It showed her sitting alone at her kitchen table, reviewing old clips of herself crying on TV, whispering, "That wasn't me. This is." Viewers wept. Critics called it raw, necessary, revolutionary. But the most powerful moment came near the end. Footage played of the courtroom, the verdict, the cheers outside. Over it, Rasheeda's voice said, "For years, they told me to play the loyal wife, the perfect woman. But I was never perfect. I was just real and they couldn't handle that." The screen faded to black, and then one final quote appeared: "You can't edit truth." In the months that followed, she became a symbol not just of resilience, but of ownership. Universities invited her to speak on media ethics. Advocacy groups formed around her case. Even Hollywood unions began drafting truth in editing clauses for unscripted shows. Still, she never forgot what it cost her. Some nights, she'd sit on her porch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the quiet streets. No cameras, no producers, no noise, just peace. Her phone buzzed one evening, a message from Jasmine. "I watched your doc. Thank you for freeing all of us." Rasheeda smiled faintly and typed back, "We freed ourselves." Later, she scrolled through her comments one last time. A fan had written, "You taught us that even when the world edits your story, you can take the pen back." She liked the comment, set her phone down, and exhaled. The fight was over. The truth had been told. And for the first time in more than a decade, Rasheeda Frost wasn't a storyline. She was just herself, unfiltered, unedited, and finally, free. Months turned into a year, and the noise began to quiet, replaced by something slower and steadier: respect. The kind that doesn't trend but lasts. Rasheeda's name no longer floated around as gossip. It was spoken in classrooms, panel discussions, and industry boardrooms. She had become the case study everyone referenced when they talked about media accountability. The documentary continued to win awards. Netflix flew her to Los Angeles for a private screening attended by directors, activists, and students from film schools across the country. When the lights came up, the applause lasted so long she didn't know what to do with her hands. A young filmmaker asked, "After everything they took from you, how did you find the courage to keep telling your story?" She paused before answering. "I stopped waiting for permission," she said. "They used to hand me scripts and tell me who I was. The moment I threw them away, I started living again." Outside the theater, camera flashes blinked in the dark. But it wasn't chaos anymore, it was celebration. She signed autographs, hugged strangers, and smiled easily, without the heaviness that once followed her. Back in Atlanta, her life moved with quieter rhythm. She reopened Frost Bistro with a new concept: posters. No memorabilia from the show, just warm lights, soft jazz, and a sign by the door that read, "No cameras, no producers, no scripts, just life." Customers loved it. The restaurant became a sanctuary for people who'd grown tired of pretending online. Influencers, former castmates, even producers came in quietly, sitting at tables and talking like real people for a change. Carly Red visited often. She laughed and said, "Girl, I can finally eat without someone asking me to throw a drink for the camera." Rasheeda smiled. "Guess we finally got our piece." Spice came too, hair wrapped, makeup off, relaxed in a way fans had never seen her. "You changed everything, sis," she told Rasheeda. "They can't control us anymore." Sometimes Jasmine stopped by as well, usually late in the evening when the place was quiet. They'd talk softly, no cameras, no old wounds, just two women who had lived through the same machine. Jasmine was working on a podcast called Behind the Edit, giving a voice to other women silenced by reality contracts. Rasheeda agreed to be her first guest. On the episode, she said, "People think the lawsuit was the hard part. It wasn't. The hard part was learning to live a real life again after so many years of performing one." The words resonated far beyond Atlanta. Within weeks, networks across the country began releasing statements promising transparent production ethics. Whether sincere or not, they all used one phrase that had become synonymous with her name, the Rasheeda Standard. Meanwhile, her memoir Unedited finally hit shelves. The cover was simple, just a close-up of her face. No makeup, no jewelry, just truth. It sold out within hours. Critics called it a manifesto for authenticity. One reviewer wrote, "Rasheeda Frost didn't just sue a network. She rewrote the rules of storytelling. The money poured in, but she no longer chased it. She built scholarships for young Black women studying film, opened mentorship programs for aspiring editors, and funded workshops about consent and creative control in entertainment. Every initiative carried the same motto, own your story." One spring evening, as she locked up the restaurant, Kirk arrived quietly. He looked older, humbler, but peaceful. "I saw your interview today," he said. "You looked happy." "I am," she said. He nodded, glancing at the sign by the door. "No scripts, huh?" She smiled faintly. "No scripts." They stood there a moment, the kind of silence that didn't need fixing. When he finally walked away, she didn't feel sadness, just gratitude. Some stories didn't need sequels. Later that night, she drove out to the edge of the city, parked near the water, and sat watching the skyline glow. She thought about the woman she used to be, the one who cried on cue, who smiled through humiliation, who let strangers define her worth. She whispered softly, "You made it out." Her phone buzzed a text from her lawyer. VH1 officially settled with the remaining cast today. "It's done." She smiled to herself. The empire had fallen, quietly, without fireworks. As the city lights shimmered across the water, she leaned back and breathed in the quiet. The fame, the lawsuits, the noise, it had all burned away. What was left was something cleaner, lighter, real. For the first time in years, she wasn't a headline, a meme, or a plot. She was just Rasheeda Frost, woman, mother, business owner, survivor. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew this was the real ending, and written, unedited, and finally hers. The morning sun poured through the wide windows of her Atlanta home. Soft and steady, touching everything it once missed while the world had been watching. The house felt different now. No camera lights, no crew call sheets, no fake arguments waiting to happen. Just quiet. Rasheeda moved slowly through the kitchen, barefoot, her phone face down on the counter. She no longer rushed to check notifications or trending tags. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. Outside, Atlanta had turned her name into a legend. Street murals showed her face beside words like truth, freedom, and real woman energy. Every magazine cover tried to capture her, but none of them could. People were fascinated not because she had won, but because she had walked away. TV networks called weekly with offers, docuseries, talk shows, comeback specials, but she turned them all down. "My story isn't for sale," she told her manager, and she meant it. Frost Bistro thrived quietly. The walls were repainted, the menu refined, the energy softer, the kind of place where people came to exhale. Old castmates visited often, each carrying a piece of their own healing. Carly Red joked that she finally had a storyline worth living. Spice talked about releasing an album inspired by freedom, not fame. Jasmine brought her baby boy once, shy but proud, and Rasheeda hugged her like a sister. What had once been scandal had become survival, and survival had made them human again. In the evenings, Rasheeda would sit outside on the patio after closing, watching the city lights blink through the haze. Kirk sometimes joined her, sometimes didn't. When he did, they talked like old friends, quiet, cautious, kind. No forced apologies, no made-for-TV tension. Just two people who had lived through too much pretending to ever pretend again. He told her he'd started therapy. She told him she was proud. They didn't say the word love, but something gentler lived between them. The release of her memoir, Unedited, was the final ripple. Readers devoured every chapter, her early music dreams, the betrayal, the lawsuit, the redemption. She wrote with honesty that cut deep but never cruel. The hardest part wasn't what they did to me, she wrote. It was realizing I let them. Book clubs dissected her sentences like scripture. Professors taught her case in media courses. She didn't need to defend herself anymore. Her truth spoke fluently without her voice. Months passed, and she began to travel. New York, Los Angeles, London, places that once treated her like a character, now welcomed her as a guest of honor. In London, a young student approached her after a lecture, nervous but glowing. I want to make documentaries that show Black women as full people, not just storylines, she said. Rasheeda smiled, touched the girl's shoulder, and replied, then start by believing you're already one. Still, Atlanta always called her home. One night, near the anniversary of her verdict, she hosted a quiet dinner at the bistro. Just family, close friends, and a few people who had stood by her through it all. Candles flickered against the wood tables, laughter rolled softly across the room, and the air carried peace instead of performance. She raised her glass, not for a toast but for gratitude. We made it, she said simply. Real life, no edits. Everyone smiled, and for a long time no one spoke, because there was nothing left to fix. Later, after everyone had gone, she locked the doors herself, took off her heels, and stood barefoot on the cool tile floor. She could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of cars passing outside, and somewhere in the distance, a train. She realized those ordinary sounds were what she had missed most all along the background of a real life. She walked to the door, looked back once, and whispered, thank you. The world kept moving, new shows, new scandals, new noise, but her story stayed quiet, grounded. She didn't need to chase relevance anymore because she had become something rarer than fame. She had become whole. And in the stillness of that truth, Rasheeda Frost finally lived not as someone's storyline, not as a wife, not as a brand, but as herself, flawed, free, and gloriously unedited. The air in Atlanta felt softer now, as if the city itself had exhaled. For years it had buzzed with gossip and cameras, the rhythm of reality television dictating when people laughed, cried, or cared. But lately, things were quieter. No one chased drama down Peachtree anymore. The gossip blogs still ran, but their tone had changed. People were tired of spectacle. They wanted stories that felt like breathing again. And somewhere at the center of that shift was Rasheeda Frost, the woman who had turned her pain into a revolution. It had been almost 3 years since the verdict, and the world had moved on in the way it always does, but her name stayed. Professors taught her lawsuit as part of media ethics courses, calling it the case that redefined consent in entertainment. Journalists who once wrote clickbait headlines about her marriage now asked for thoughtful interviews about truth and ownership. Young women quoted her lines in their graduation speeches. Her old scenes, once edited to humiliate, were now dissected in film schools as examples of manipulation and narrative power. She had become both lesson and legacy, a living proof of what happens when someone stops being afraid to speak. She woke early most mornings, sometimes before sunrise, just to enjoy the quiet before Atlanta came alive. She'd walk barefoot through her kitchen, coffee mug in hand, the smell of cinnamon and honey drifting through the air. The house had changed too. She'd taken down all reminders of the show, the framed photos, the staged family moments, the fake decor the production team once insisted on to make things look more relatable. Now her walls were empty except for art made by local women, paintings of faces, soft eyes, and unfiltered emotion. She said they reminded her of who she was before cameras learned her name. Her mornings were simple now. She'd make breakfast for her sons, play soft music, open the blinds, and check her emails, though most of them were invitations she never accepted. Everyone wanted her to speak somewhere, appear somewhere, headline something. She appreciated the love, but she'd spent too long performing to ever crave the spotlight again. Now she chose stillness. Her friends called it peace. She called it healing. But peace didn't mean disappearance. She was busier than ever, just differently. Her foundation, the Frost Truth Initiative, had become one of the largest advocacy networks for women in media. They offered free legal help to reality show participants, teaching them about contracts, image rights, and mental health support. Every few months, Rasheeda would visit their workshops, sit in a circle with a group of young women, and listen. She never lectured. She just let them talk. One day, a girl barely 20 said through tears, "They told me if I didn't act wild enough, they'd cut me from the show. I needed the money." Rasheeda squeezed her hand and said, "Baby, they made us believe survival meant obedience, but you're allowed to be quiet and still be powerful." Word spread about those meetings. Journalists called them healing circles, though Rasheeda laughed at the phrase. "It's just women talking," she'd say, "and that's always been the most powerful thing." Her memoir, unedited, had gone through 5 print runs by then. She'd recorded the audiobook herself, her soft Atlanta drawl turning every word into something intimate. People listened on long drives, in laundromats, on night shifts. Some said her voice made them cry. Others said it made them brave. She'd never thought of herself as a writer, but the book had become her most successful creation. Every chapter felt like exhaling something she'd held in for too long. There was one chapter everyone talked about, the one simply titled Silence. In it, she described sitting in her dressing room during her final season, staring at her reflection while a producer knocked on the door, begging her to cry on cue. They said the audience needed emotion, she wrote, but I realized I was the audience too, and I needed peace. Readers quoted that line everywhere, printing it on t-shirts, posters, and journal covers. But for Rasheeda, it wasn't a slogan, it was memory. Frost Bistro became her sanctuary. She redesigned it after the trial, soft earth tones, jazz on loop, menus handwritten in gentle cursive. On weekends, poets performed near the bar, reading verses about truth and identity. The crowd was mixed, old fans, students, people who had never watched a single episode but came because they admired what she stood for. The walls carried energy, healing energy, as Spice once called it. She'd stop by sometimes, still vibrant, still loud, laughing in patois as she teased Rasheeda for being too zen. Carly Red came often too, always dramatic, always late, but calmer now. She was producing a documentary of her own called After the Edit, and she credited Rasheeda for inspiring it. Even Jasmine came by from time to time. Their conversations were quiet, gentle, sometimes awkward, but never tense. There was forgiveness there, not forced but slow, like something that grows naturally once the noise dies down. Jasmine had rebuilt her life too, raising her son, running a small clothing line, hosting a podcast about truth in storytelling. She always said, "They thought they broke us, but really they just introduced us to ourselves." Rasheeda agreed. On one warm afternoon, a group of film students from Howard University visited the restaurant to interview her. They sat with their recorders on the table, hands shaking slightly. One of them asked, "Do you think reality TV can ever be honest again?" She thought about it for a moment before answering. "Honesty isn't in the editing," she said. "It's in the intention. The camera's just a tool. It's the people behind it who decide whether it's used for truth or for control." The students nodded, scribbling notes, their eyes bright with admiration. Before they left, one of them said, "We're going to make something different because of you." Rasheeda smiled and replied, then all of this meant something. At night, she wrote again, sometimes essays, sometimes poems, sometimes just thoughts. She never published them, at least not yet. They were for her. She'd sit by the window, listening to the hum of the city, and let the words flow. She wrote about silence, motherhood, black womanhood, money, fame, forgiveness, and the strange peace of being seen for who you really are instead of what people imagine. She once wrote a line she liked so much she framed it. "I survived the edit, but I lived the aftermath." It hung above her writing desk now, next to a photo of her younger self, the girl with wide eyes and a microphone, still believing that television could be honest. She didn't miss the cameras, but sometimes she missed music. Every now and then, she'd hum old melodies while closing the restaurant, her voice low and rich. One night, Kirk heard her from the door and smiled softly. "You should record again," he said. She laughed. No labels ready for this version of me. But he was right. Something in her still needed to create. Eventually, she did go back to the studio, not for fame, but for healing. The songs were slower now, stripped down, no autotune, no image polish. She called the album Real Time. It wasn't a hit in the commercial sense, but it moved people. Critics called it a love letter to honesty. Fans said it sounded like closure. Her relationship with Kirk had evolved into something unrecognizable but healthy. They no longer played roles, no longer tried to prove anything to the public. They were partners in business, co-parents, sometimes even friends. Occasionally, people online speculated about reconciliation, but she ignored it. "Love isn't always romantic," she once said in an interview. "Sometimes it's just peace between two people who stopped pretending." Every summer, she'd visit her mother's old house out in the Georgia countryside. She'd sit on the porch swing at dusk, watching fireflies and listening to the cicadas hum. It reminded her of a time before contracts, before edits, before the world decided who she should be. She often brought her sons with her. They'd fish at the nearby pond, laugh, talk about dreams. One night, her youngest asked, "Mama, do you ever miss being on TV?" She smiled, tucking his hair behind his ear. "No, baby. TV was the dream. This is the life." In the background of her piece, the industry kept shifting. Several reality shows folded after lawsuits and investigations. New ones emerged, promising transparency. Networks now required mental health counselors on set. Contestants got better pay, clearer contracts, and creative say. It was slow progress, but it was progress. Insiders called it the Frost effect. Rasheeda never bragged, but she took quiet pride in knowing that her pain had built protection for others. Eventually, she was invited to speak at the University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts. The dean introduced her as the woman who taught Hollywood that truth can trend too. She walked to the podium, wearing a simple cream suit, her hair pulled back, her tone calm. The audience of students leaned forward as she spoke. "When I was your age," she said, "I thought fame meant freedom. I learned it meant ownership. If someone else owns your image, they own your voice. Protect your voice. It's the only real thing you have." When she finished, the applause was long and genuine, not the kind that fades once cameras cut. After the speech, a young man approached her backstage. He said he'd grown up watching Love and Hip Hop with his mother, that it was their one shared ritual. "She passed away last year," he said quietly, "but she always said you reminded her of herself. When you won that case," she cried. Rasheeda hugged him tightly. "Then tell her, I carried her with me," she whispered. Time moved gently after that. She spent more days in the garden behind her house, growing lavender, tomatoes, and roses. She said the plants taught her patience. She'd sit among them, in the evenings, letting the scent wrap around her like comfort. Sometimes she'd think about all the lives she'd touched without meaning to how pain had turned into purpose. How silence had turned into voice. Other times, she just watched the sunset and let herself exist without needing a lesson in it. On the second anniversary of her verdict, her team organized a celebration, but she turned it down. Instead, she hosted a small dinner for 10 women she mentored through her foundation. They ate home-cooked food, laughed, and shared stories. One of them, a former reality contestant from another franchise, raised her glass and said, "You gave us back our names." The room went quiet, and Rasheeda blinked back tears. "No," she said softly. "You gave yourselves back your names. I just showed you where the exit was." After dinner, she walked outside alone, the night air cool against her skin. She could hear the hum of the city in the distance, faint but constant. She looked up at the moon bright, steady, unbothered by the noise below, and smiled. For the first time in decades, there was no unfinished business left in her life. No fake scene waiting to be filmed, no line waiting to be said. She was no longer fighting for truth. She was living it. As months passed, the world began calling her an icon, though she always rejected the word. "Icons belong to everyone," she'd say. "I just belong to myself." Still, awards piled up: media justice recognitions, humanitarian plaques, lifetime achievement honors. She accepted them politely, gave short speeches, then returned home quietly. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate them. She just understood that peace couldn't be hung on a wall. The following spring, a filmmaker from New York approached her about turning her story into a feature film. "We'll do it right," the woman promised. "You'll be executive producer. Full control." Rasheeda smiled kindly. "My story already had its ending," she said. "It doesn't need a sequel." But she did give permission for a film about the larger movement: the people who followed her lead, the women who spoke up, the editors who refused to cut truth for ratings. She wanted that story told more than her own. By then, her sons were grown. They often teased her about becoming the face of truth, but their pride showed in every word. One day, her oldest said, "You know, Mom, we used to get mad at how people talked about you. Now they teach you in school." She laughed. Funny how life edits itself, huh? Sometimes she visited schools quietly, without media, just to talk to young people. She'd stand in front of classrooms, jeans and sneakers, and say, "Don't let the world make your story smaller just because it's easier to sell that way." She saw pieces of her younger self in their eyes: the hunger, the hope, the naivety. But she also saw something she didn't have back then: access to truth before it's too late. As her influence grew, she started something new: a fellowship called Unedited Voices, pairing young creators with mentors to help them produce ethical storytelling projects. The first class included filmmakers from Ghana, Jamaica, Pakistan, and Atlanta. Each of them carried a story shaped by pain but directed toward change. Rasheeda sat with them one evening as they shared their ideas, smiling quietly. "This," she said, "this is the future I wanted." That same year, she received an unexpected email from VH1's new president, a woman. It was short, Formal, but sincere. "We're rebuilding the network," it read. "And it's only right that we start by acknowledging the harm. Thank you for forcing the truth into the light." Rasheeda stared at the message for a long time before replying with one line, "Better late than never." When the network publicly launched a rebrand campaign centered on integrity, they included a video montage that opened with her voice saying, "Truth doesn't hurt the story, it gives it power." People called it poetic justice. Rasheeda called it orny. Years later, when the city honored her with a mural downtown, a life-sized portrait surrounded by the words, "No scripts, no edits, no fear," she attended quietly, wearing sunglasses and a plain white dress. As she stood before the painting, people clapped, cheered, cried. She smiled softly and said only, "This is for every woman who has ever told her pain was content." After the crowd dispersed, she lingered a while longer, watching the mural glow in the evening light. The artist, a young woman with paint on her hands, came up and said shyly, "I hope I got you right." Rasheeda looked at the mural, at the strong, unfiltered gaze staring back at her. "You did," she said, "you finally got me right." That night, she drove home with the windows down, the warm wind tangling her hair. She turned on the radio, not for news, not for hits, just for sound, and a familiar voice filled the car, her own, singing one of her songs from real time. She laughed quietly, surprised. Her voice sounded older now, wiser, but still hers. She pulled over for a moment, let the song play, and whispered, "Look at us now." Home was quiet when she arrived. She made tea, sat by the window, and opened her journal. She wrote slowly, without thinking too much, just letting the words flow. The cameras stopped rolling, but life didn't. The story goes on, softer now, truer now. Not everyone who watched me understood me, but I did. And that's enough. She set the pen down, folded her arms on the table, and watched the city lights flicker in the distance. Atlanta had changed, and so had she. She no longer belonged to the network, to the audience, or to the image they built of her. She belonged only to herself. Outside, the sky deepened into a shade of indigo, stars emerging one by one. She thought of every woman who had walked through fire and come out without applause. Every voice that refused to stay quiet, every truth that finally found air. Somewhere inside her, a peace settled that no producer could ever script. She smiled to herself, whispering into the dark, "No edits." And the night, wide and endless, seemed to answer back in its quiet wail, unfiltered, and free. 10 years had passed since the lawsuit, and Atlanta had grown louder, brighter, younger. Skyscrapers rose where old warehouses used to be, and the city that once whispered her name now carried it like legend. Rasheeda Frost had long stopped caring about fame, but fame never stopped caring about her. She had become a symbol of truth, a quiet force of independence, someone who had walked away from the machine and somehow made it to the other side. Her beauty brand had expanded into a full media company called Frost House Studios, a network dedicated to real stories told by real people. She hired young filmmakers, mostly women, mostly from the South, and gave them a platform she wished she'd had years ago. In every interview, she repeated the same phrase, "We don't chase views. We chase truth." For a while, life moved smoothly. She had found a rhythm, a way of living that felt full without being loud. She spent mornings reviewing projects from her team, afternoons visiting her sons' families, and evenings walking through the gardens behind her home. The past felt far away, like an old film she had finally turned off. But peace, as she'd learned, rarely stays quiet forever. It began one evening in early spring. She was scrolling through her phone when she saw a headline trending across social media. Streamflix announces Frost. The Untold Truth, a limited series on the woman who took down VH1. Her heart froze. There was her name, her story, her face on the poster played by an actress she'd never met, dressed in one of her old outfits from Love and Hip Hop. The caption read, "Based on real events." Within hours, her phone started buzzing. Friends called. Journalists texted. Her lawyer left a voicemail. They didn't reach out for rights, not even a courtesy heads up. She turned off the phone and stared at the wall, the silence heavier than any noise. After everything, after building her own platform, after fighting for ownership, they were doing it again. They were stealing her life for entertainment. The next morning, she met with her legal team in the Frost House conference room. The walls were covered in framed photos of young women directors, each smiling proudly. "They think they can twist your story because it's public record," her lawyer explained. "They'll claim it's artistic interpretation." Rasheeda leaned forward, eyes sharp. "They can interpret what they want, but they can't rewrite my truth. By noon, the trailer had dropped. Millions of views in hours. The opening scene showed a tearful actress whispering, "They made me fake my own life," followed by quick flashes of courtroom drama and a man clearly styled to look like Kirk. The voiceover said, "Based on real deception, inspired by the woman who turned the industry upside down." The internet exploded. Fans were divided. Some defended her. Others said, "She's fair game, it's history." One influencer tweeted, "If you didn't want people to tell your story, you shouldn't have made it public." She didn't reply, but inside she felt that old ache, the same helplessness she'd once fought so hard to destroy. Carly Red called that night. "Girl, they got me in the trailer too," she said, half angry, half amused. "They got some actress throwing a drink that looks like me." Rasheeda sighed. "They're not just rewriting me, they're rewriting all of us." Jasmine texted minutes later, sending a link. "They're using my storyline too. Even my son's name." Within days, hashtags started trending. Hashtag Stag Boycott Frost Series. Hashtag Respect RASHEEDA. Hashtag Not Your Story. Her team wanted to sue immediately, but she didn't answer right away. She sat in her office, staring at the screen, watching clips of herself from years ago, wands this time. She thought about what she'd built, what she'd lost, what she'd survived. "If I go after them," she said finally, "it's not just for me. It's for every person who ever had their story stolen by people who called it art." The next week, Frost House Studios filed an injunction against Streamflix for unauthorized use of likeness and misrepresentation. The filing made headlines instantly. Rasheeda Frost vs. Streamflix Round 2 begins. Her lawyer warned her it wouldn't be easy. "They have billions in lawyers and contracts. This won't be another victory parade." Rasheeda just smiled faintly. "It's not a parade I'm after. It's a reminder." As the case unfolded, Streamflix doubled down. They released statements claiming the series was fictionalized for dramatic purposes, but every preview looked painfully real. They mimicked her old home, her business, even her voice. When the first episode leaked online, she refused to watch it, but fans described it in detail. They said it painted her as manipulative, hungry for fame, and emotionally unstable. "They're turning you back into the caricature you fought to escape," her assistant said. The morning after, she finally sat down in front of her TV. The screen glowed. The fake version of herself, pacing a fake courtroom, yelling at a fake Kirk. It felt like watching someone rob her soul in high definition. When it ended, she turned off the TV and whispered, "Not again." But this time, she wasn't alone. Frost House's social media team launched a counter-campaign called My Story, My Voice. They began releasing short videos of real women in media telling their unedited truths. The first one featured Rasheeda herself, sitting in her office with no makeup, no lighting. She looked straight into the camera and said, "They think stories belong to whoever can afford to film them. I'm here to remind them they belong to the people who lived them." Within hours, the clip had over 10 million views. The campaign grew overnight. Artists, actors, journalists, even politicians joined in. The message spread beyond television into music, journalism, and social platforms. People began questioning how much of anyone's story really belonged to them anymore. Students started protests at universities, holding signs that read "Truth isn't a prop." As pressure mounted, Streamflix executives requested a private meeting. It was held in Los Angeles, in a high-rise overlooking the city. Rasheeda arrived in a white suit, composed. Across the table sat their legal team, 4 lawyers, 2 executives, and a nervous publicist. "We respect your legacy," one executive began, "but this series is legally protected. It's transformative art." She smiled politely. "Transformative? You took my pain, changed the names, and called it creativity. That's not art, it's theft with a trailer." The meeting ended without resolution, but the press caught wind of her quote, and it went viral. Suddenly, Streamflix was on defense. Sponsors pulled ads. Viewers left bad reviews. The actress who played her posted a statement apologizing, saying she hadn't known how close the story really was. Still, the series aired, and when it did, something unexpected happened. It flopped. Critics called it cold, exploitative, soulless. One reviewer wrote, "The problem with trying to dramatize truth is that you can't fake authenticity. And no actor alive can replicate what Rasheeda Frost already lived." Within a week, Streamflix pulled it from their front page. But Rasheeda wasn't finished. She turned her fight into fuel. Frost House Studios began developing a docuseries of its own titled Truth Rights, exploring how media companies profit from personal pain. It wasn't about revenge, it was education. She interviewed creators, survivors, even editors who admitted their guilt. It was raw, slow, honest. The first episode premiered to record numbers. In one emotional scene, she sat alone in the studio and said, "They tried to rewrite me twice. The first time they did it for fame. The second time they did it for art. Both times they forgot the same thing: truth has a heartbeat." Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't cut the take. The series changed everything again. Major studios began revising legal standards for biographical productions. A new law proposal called the Rasheeda Act gained traction, requiring consent for any dramatization of real individuals' lives. It passed 2 years later. The media started calling her the woman who sued Hollywood and won twice. She laughed whenever she heard it. "I didn't win against Hollywood," she'd tell reporters. "I just reminded it that people aren't characters." Years later, when she looked back on it all, she realized something simple. Every time they tried to steal her story, she came out stronger, more herself. The truth didn't just survive, it evolved. Frost House Studios grew into an empire of real voices, run by people who knew that authenticity isn't weakness, it's currency. On the 10th anniversary of the series' cancellation, she stood in front of a live audience for a charity gala, her hair silvered now, her tones softer but steady. She told the crowd, "You can fake a laugh, you can fake a tear, but you can't fake growth." They rose to their feet in applause. Later that night, she walked alone through the Frost House offices. Past the posters of the women she'd helped, the words etched on the wall behind her desk. No scripts, no edits, no fear. She smiled, whispering to herself, "They can film all the lies they want. I'm still the only one living the truth." And outside, as Atlanta lights glittered through her window, Rasheeda Frost, the woman they once wrote off as reality TV drama, stood in the quiet she had built from chaos, untouchable, unedited, and still unafraid. It was late autumn when the next storm arrived. Though it didn't come with flashing cameras or courtroom drama, it came quietly, like a whisper that wouldn't leave. Frost House had just released its third season of Truth Rights, now syndicated in over 20 countries. Universities screened it in media ethics classes, networks quoted it in press releases. And the word truth had started to sound like a brand something companies borrowed when they needed redemption. Rasheeda noticed. She watched corporations twist her message into slogans for products she'd never touch. Honesty in every bite, unedited living. It was everywhere, diluted, hollow. One evening, she sat in her office watching a new ad for a streaming platform that used her voice without credit. Her quote, "Truth has a heartbeat," echoed over scenes of influencers and staged documentaries. She felt something colder than anger, a kind of fatigue. Truth had become marketable again, and this time, they'd learned to disguise the theft as admiration. Her assistant knocked softly. "Ms. Frost," CNN called, "they want your comment on the Truth Revolution piece they're running." She smiled faintly. "Tell them, I've said enough truth for one lifetime." She leaned back in her chair, staring out at the skyline, the lights stretching like constellations. Even when she won, the world found new ways to sell her victories. But she wasn't bitter. She was older now, wiser. Her edges had softened, though her core never changed. She spent her mornings walking by the river, her afternoons reading submissions from young writers, her evenings cooking simple meals and listening to music. Sometimes Kirk stopped by to check in, still respectful, still loyal in his quiet way. They'd sit outside with tea and talk about their sons, about business, about nothing important. He always said she'd done the impossible, turned pain into peace. She always replied, "Peace is just truth without noise." One night, her phone buzzed with a name she hadn't seen in years. Yandi. The message was short. "Need to talk. Something big." The next day, they met in New York at a small cafe tucked away in Harlem. Yandi looked restless, the same determined energy she'd always had. "There's a new network forming," she said. "They want to do a reality series, but this time, it's real. Full creative control for the cast. No edits, no forced drama. And they want you as executive producer." Rasheeda stirred her coffee, silent for a moment. "Why me?" "Because no one trusts the industry anymore," Yandi said. "They trust you. You're the only one who walked out clean." The idea lingered in her mind long after she flew back to Atlanta. She couldn't deny the irony. After years of tearing down reality TV, the universe was asking her to rebuild it. But maybe that was the point. Maybe truth wasn't about refusing to tell stories, it was about reclaiming how they were told. Months later, the project began. They called it The Real House, a raw documentary-style series following 5 women entrepreneurs navigating success, motherhood, and identity. No scripts, no production manipulation. Each woman owned her footage. It wasn't flashy, but it was magnetic. People were drawn to the quiet moments, the unfiltered laughter, the small arguments, the silent strength. Critics called it revolutionary simplicity. One reviewer wrote, "For the first time, reality TV feels like life again." The show exploded. Frost House's servers crashed the night of the premiere. Social media flooded with praise. Viewers said it made them remember why they loved watching people be human in the first place. For Rasheeda, it was surreal. She sat alone in her living room during the first broadcast, her name rolling in the credits as executive producer. No camera caught her reaction this time. She just smiled, quietly, whispering, "Finally." But with success came shadows. A former VH1 executive resurfaced, bitter and broke, claiming the new show was plagiarized from the original love and hip-hop format. Tabloids grabbed the headline, spinning it into controversy. She ignored most of it. But one morning, a blogger published a long expose accusing her of selling the same system she once fought. The article spread fast. She didn't respond online, but the words stayed with her. That night, she walked through the empty Frost House studio, past the posters of her past victories. She thought about the line between creation and control, between fighting the machine and becoming one. She whispered to herself, "What if the only way to change the system is to run it?" In the weeks that followed, she decided to open Frost House Academy, a program for young creators to learn ethical production. She spent her days teaching them how to build stories without exploitation. "You don't need to break people to make art," she told them. "You just need to listen." Her classes filled instantly. Students came from across the world. She became known not as a mogul, but as a mentor. Still, the media couldn't resist her. One day, a reporter asked during an interview, "Do you ever miss the chaos?" She laughed. "Chaos taught me everything. But peace is where I finally understood it." As the years passed, her life slowed into something almost sacred. Birthdays were quiet dinners. Holidays were small, real, warm. Her sons had children of their own, and she became the kind of grandmother who taught lessons with stories instead of rules. Sometimes she'd hold her granddaughter and say, "They used to call me a character. Now I'm a chapter. One day, you'll write your own." When Frost House celebrated its 15th anniversary, Atlanta honored her with a Lifetime Award for Cultural Reform. At the ceremony, she walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, wearing a deep gold dress that shimmered under the lights. The host introduced her as the woman who turned television human again. She stood behind the microphone, her voice calm but commanding. "You can't script truth," she said. "You can only live it. And when you live it long enough, people start to believe again." The audience rose to their feet, clapping until she had to wave them down. Later, as the cameras packed up and the crowd faded, she stayed behind for a moment, staring out at the empty stage. She realized how strange it felt to be celebrated for what once made her cry. But maybe that was the beauty of it, the transformation of pain into purpose, of chaos into clarity. That night, she returned home, the award sitting quietly on her kitchen counter. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching rain streak down the glass. The city lights blurred into soft gold and silver. She thought about every version of herself, the scared woman on camera, the fighter in court, the teacher in the classroom, the mother, the survivor, the storyteller. All of them lived inside her, layered, uncut, whole. Her phone buzzed a message from Jasmine. "You changed everything. We're filming season 4, and the girls are crying real tears. Not for the camera, just for life." Rasheeda smiled, typed back one word, "Good." Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance, the kind of storm that brings calm instead of fear. She closed her eyes and listened. Her life was still unfolding, still imperfect, still beautiful, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything to anyone, not to the audience, not to the industry, not even to herself. Truth, she thought, isn't something you defend forever. It's something you live quietly until the noise forgets you were ever fighting. And as the rain kept falling, she whispered into the stillness, "No scripts, no edits, no fear." Then she smiled and let the world rest exactly where it was, unwritten, unfinished, and perfectly real. Before you scroll away, take a second to breathe. You've watched every twist, every storm, every quiet moment that turned Rasheeda Frost from a headline into a human being. You've seen the lies that built her world, and the truth that burned it down. You saw her fight back when the cameras lied, stand alone when the world mocked her, and rise again when no one believed she could. And if you've come this far, it means something inside you connected to her story, not the fame, not the drama, but the fight to own your voice in a world that profits from taking it away. This isn't just a story about television. It's about every person who's ever been told they don't get to explain themselves. It's about the quiet battles people fight off camera, in real life, when no one's clapping. It's about the moments when you look in the mirror and realize someone else has been editing your story for years, telling you who you are, what you deserve, and how your pain should look to make others comfortable. Rasheeda's story reminds us that you can take that power back. You can stop performing. You can walk off set, even if the whole world expects you to stay. So as you sit there now, whether you're watching from your phone, your laptop, or your TV, understand this. Every click, every comment, every view is a choice. What we give our attention to grows. And when we choose to watch stories that honor truth instead of exploit it, we change what entertainment means. When we demand real over perfect, healing over humiliation, honesty over hype, we shift the world one view at a time. Rasheeda didn't win because she sued a network. She won because she told the truth and refused to let them cut it down to size. And that's a kind of victory no judge can sign off on. It's earned in silence, in scars, in years of rebuilding. The same people who once laughed at her pain now study her strength. And maybe that's what justice really looks like. If this story moved you, don't just keep scrolling. Make some noise. Drop a comment and tell us what moment hit you the hardest. Was it the fake storyline that broke her marriage? The courtroom confession? The moment she walked away from the spotlight and chose peace over profit? We want to hear your voice because this platform isn't just about stories anymore. It's about conversation. Hit that like button if you believe in stories that tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that silence isn't weakness. It's power waiting for the right time to speak. Subscribe if you want more stories that go beneath the surface, because this channel isn't chasing gossip, it's chasing meaning. And together, we're building a new kind of storytelling, one where truth gets more views than lies ever could. Remember how many times Rasheeda was told she was finished? How many times they said she'd never recover, never rebuild, never matter again? And yet here she is, proof that the world doesn't decide when your story ends. You do. Every time you get up, every time you choose honesty over performance, every time you live without filters, you rewrite the script. So if you're sitting there thinking your story is too messy, too complicated, too hard to tell, don't edit it. Don't make it smaller. Life isn't a show, it's a process. And sometimes the parts you're ashamed of are the same parts that make people love you the most. The truth isn't always beautiful, but it's always worth hearing. And someone out there needs your version of it. Because what started as one woman's fight against manipulation turned into a movement for everyone who's ever been misrepresented, underestimated, or misunderstood. And it doesn't stop here. Every view, every voice, every conversation you start helps push that movement further. So here's what we want you to do. Take this energy and carry it outside the screen. Tell your own truth, even if it shakes the room. Defend it when people twist it. Protect it when they mock it. And if the world tries to edit you, remember what Rasheeda said: no scripts, no edits, no fear. Drop a heart in the comments if you're part of that promise. Write truth matters if you're done letting other people define what's real. And before you go, hit subscribe and join a community that doesn't chase controversy, it builds connection. This is more than a channel. This is the home of unedited voices. And if you've watched until now, you're part of that legacy. Because truth doesn't need filters. It just needs people brave enough to tell it. And as always, thank you for watching, for listening, and for choosing real. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep living yours, unedited.